Hey there, fellow deep divers. Ready to take a plunge into a mystery?
Always. What do we got today?
Well, today we're diving into a mystery that's been swirling around for centuries. The female stranger of Alexandria, Virginia.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Where are we starting with this one?
Our main source today is a local newspaper article. It's from the Alexandria Times.
Oh, cool, local stuff. When was it published?
Get this on Halloween back in 2019.
Talk about setting the mood, right? Perfect timing for a spooky story.
Exactly, and the article really leans into all that. It dives into the story of a young woman who arrives at Gadsby's Tavern in 1816. She was already really sick when she got there.
Oh, wow, so she was traveling. Was it a long trip?
Yeah, she arrived with a well-dressed gentleman, and the article mentions she got sick during their voyage.
Interesting. So right away you've got this journey, a story that began way before they even got to Alexandria. Makes you wonder where they were coming from.
Exactly, and then things take an even more mysterious turn.
Oh, how so?
Right before she dies, the man makes everyone involved, the doctors, nurses, even the tavern owners, swear an oath.
An oath? Like what kind of oath?
They had to promise to never, ever reveal their identities.
Wow, that is a serious oath. Why would he do that?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It makes you wonder, was he protecting her? Her reputation, maybe? Were they running from something? Or someone?
I can see why this story has become a legend. That oath just seals the deal, turns a tragic event into, like, a full-blown mystery.
Right. And the article really highlights how this lack of information, the fact that their names were deliberately erased makes the whole thing both fascinating and frustrating at the same time.
Yeah, I get that. We're wired to crave answers, right? To want to make sense of things. And this story just leaves us hanging.
Totally.
For a historian, it's a nightmare. You've got no primary sources, no documents to confirm any of these details. All we have are these secondhand accounts that popped up decades later.
Wow. Yeah, I can't even imagine trying to piece this together as a historian.
It'd be like trying to solve a puzzle with like half the pieces missing, and the other half might be totally fake.
Talk about a challenge. And yet, people have been trying to crack this case for over 200 years. The article mentions a bunch of theories that have come up over the years. You've got theories about yellow fever being the cause of death, a scandalous love affair, even whispers about secret royalty. Crazy, right?
Yeah, it is kind of crazy, but it's also fascinating how these stories like evolve over time, especially when there's no real facts to go on. People want an explanation so badly that they'll just fill in the gaps with, whatever makes sense to them, whatever fits their own beliefs.
It's like a giant game of historical telephone, isn't it? Someone whispers a story, and by the time it gets passed down a few times, it's completely different.
Exactly. And what's so cool is how these different versions reflect like the fears and values of the time they were told in.
Right, like what can those theories tell us about the people who came up with them?
Yeah. I mean, think about it. What does the yellow fever theory tell us about the public health concerns of the 19th century?
Interesting.
And then you've got the secret royalty idea. Does that maybe tap into our obsession with power and privilege? I don't know, just some thoughts.
I love that. It's like each theory gives us a little window into the past.
Right. And it's not just about the facts of the case. It's about, the cultural context too.
Absolutely. The article quotes a local historian who sums it up perfectly. They said, and I quote, "The true facts of the female stranger story are very few, so that's why it's turned into this amazing urban legend, to try to fill in the pieces of where the holes are in the story."
Love that quote. Really gets to the heart of it, I think. Urban legends give us a way to deal with the stuff we don't understand.
Yeah, the unexplained stuff, the things that maybe even scare us a little.
Exactly. It's like our brains are wired to find patterns and create stories, even if there's not much to go on.
It really makes you think, what does this particular story tell us about the people of Alexandria, both then and now? Like, what were they afraid of? What did they want?
Totally, what were their hopes, their dreams?
What were their anxieties?
Right, and there's another layer to this that's pretty interesting. The article mentions that even with modern technology like DNA testing,
Oh, yeah.
there's this whole debate about whether we should even try to figure out who the female stranger really was.
Right, right. It's like, on the one hand, we have this drive to solve the puzzle.
The need to know.
Exactly. But on the other hand, don't we kind of owe it to her to respect her wish to stay anonymous? I mean, that's what the man wanted, right?
It's a tough one. Some people argue that digging up her identity would be a total violation.
Like, we'd be disrespecting her even in death. Kind of like she's still in control of her own story even now.
Exactly, which makes you think, who does own history anyway?
Right. Is it ours to uncover and analyze however we want? Or are there some stories, some lives that deserve to remain a secret?
Tough questions. And you know what else?
What's that?
Her anonymity is kind of what makes the whole legend so powerful. The mystery is the hook, I mean, would the story be as captivating if we knew all the answers?
That's a good point. Maybe some things are better left unanswered.
Maybe.
It's definitely something to keep in mind as we dive into all the different theories and stories about the female stranger.
For sure. Sometimes the most interesting stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And speaking of questions, there's something else in this article that I found really interesting. It seems like St. Paul's Cemetery, where the female stranger is buried, has another ghost story attached to it.
Really?
And this one's from way back in 1885.
Another ghost story. Even in death, it seems like the female stranger isn't alone in her mystery. What's the story with this one?
Okay, so I got to ask, what can you tell us about this other ghostly presence? And could it be connected to the female stranger somehow?
Well, the reports from back then described this figure as like a somber-clad, tall figure. They thought it was a woman.
Okay, a mysterious woman in dark clothing. Spooky. And they saw her where exactly?
Gliding around St. Paul's Church, people said she'd just appear out of nowhere, like from alleyways and stuff.
Straight out of a horror movie. So this wasn't just like a one-time thing, right? People saw her multiple times.
Oh, yeah, multiple times. There were all these accounts in the Alexandria Gazette about it, spanning a few years in the 1880s, actually. People said they'd run into her late at night.
I bet they were freaked out. Did anyone ever, like, try to actually see who or what it was?
You know, there was actually this one guy, James Wood, who tried to chase after her.
He chased a ghost. That's either really brave or really dumb. What happened?
Well, apparently, as he got closer, she just vanished. Poof, gone.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would shake me up a bit, too. Do you think, like, back then people were just more open to the possibility of ghosts and stuff?
Maybe. I mean, think about it. No electric lights back then. Communication was a lot slower, too.
Right. It's a different world.
Exactly. So maybe the lines between what was real and what was imagined were a little blurrier. Like, darkness held more mysteries and a good ghost story had a different kind of power, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes you think about how we see the unknown today. We're so quick to dismiss anything we can't immediately explain, like it has to have a scientific reason or it's not real. But maybe there are some things that we just can't explain.
Maybe. And maybe that's why we're so little drawn to these kinds of stories, the ones that hint at something beyond our understanding.
Definitely. It's like we want to believe in something bigger than ourselves, even if it scares us a little. And the article makes it clear that these stories, like the female stranger and the ghost at St. Paul's, they still have a hold on people. It's like Alexandria itself, it's just full of mystery.
Right, like it's soaked into the very ground. And speaking of that, Gadsby's Tavern seems to be a real hotspot for all this energy.
Makes sense considering the whole female stranger story started there. What kind of stuff happens at the tavern?
Well, the article says that every fall the tavern gets tons of calls from people who want to know more about the female stranger. And a lot of them are interested in the possibility of paranormal activity.
Wow, so it's like a pilgrimage site for ghost hunters and history buffs. But even if you don't believe in ghosts, wouldn't you agree that there's something fascinating about places with a past like that? All those stories just add another layer to the experience.
I totally agree. It's like those stories become part of the building, part of the streets, even the whole town.
Like you can almost feel the presence of the people who lived there before, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to the female stranger, it's not just about solving a puzzle. It's about connecting with a human story that goes beyond time.
And that's probably why it resonates with us so much.
Exactly, because at its core, it's a story about mystery, about the unknown, about all those unanswered questions that we grapple with as humans.
Speaking of unanswered questions, the article points out something pretty important.
Oh, what's that?
There's no official documentation, like, at all from 1816 that actually backs up the female stranger story. No ship manifests, no death certificates, nothing.
So it's like a ghost story in more ways than one, huh? Like a phantom tale that just keeps getting more and more elaborate with each retelling.
It's incredible how a story with basically no factual basis could become such a huge part of a town's identity.
I guess that's the magic of folklore, right? It steps in when we don't have all the facts and gives us an explanation. It helps us make sense of things, even if, it might not be totally true.
And the article brings up this one theory about how this specific story took off.
Okay, I'm listening.
What if it was all a big plan to boost tourism?
The old tourism boost theory. A little cynical, maybe, but I can see how it could work.
Right. I mean, you've got a town steeped in history, a mysterious death, a supposedly haunted tavern. Sounds like a pretty good recipe for attracting visitors, especially the ones who like a good spooky story.
Especially back in the 19th century. Think about it, travel wasn't as common then, and people relied more on word of mouth for their entertainment.
So a good ghost story could really make a place stand out.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine those travelers arriving in Alexandria. They hear whispers about the female stranger, and their imaginations just run wild.
And when they go home, they tell everyone they know about this mysterious woman and the haunted tavern.
Free advertising. And it's all based on the seed of a story that might not even be true.
But because there's no real evidence, it can just grow and grow.
It's like the less we know for sure, the more room there is for speculation and intrigue.
Exactly. And even today, it's still working. People are still drawn to the mystery. which really shows how powerful a good story can be.
Especially when it plays on our fascination with the unknown.
Right, but there's another side to all this too, isn't there? It's not just about ghosts and tourism. The article mentions that there's this ethical question about whether we should try to solve the mystery of the female stranger at all.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Some people believe that using DNA testing and all that would be like going against her wishes.
Like she chose to remain anonymous, so we should honor that choice.
Right, even if it means we never learn the full truth.
It's tough, isn't it? Because on the one hand, we're curious. We want to know the answers.
We want to solve the puzzle.
Exactly. But on the other hand, maybe some secrets are better left buried.
Like, do we have the right to dig up information that was intentionally hidden?
And what if we uncover something that, like, changes everything?
It's like opening Pandora's box. Once you know, you can't unknow.
And maybe there's a certain beauty in not knowing, in letting the mystery be part of the story.
Maybe that's what keeps it alive after all this time.
The mystery itself is what keeps people interested. And the article does mention a few clues that have come up over the years, little bits of information that could give us some insight into the couple's past.
Right, right. Like that article from the Alexandria Gazette in 1866. It calls the man a cheat and a swindler.
Yeah, not exactly the romantic figure I might have pictured, huh?
Definitely not. Paints him in a much darker light. And then there's that other article from 1861, the one where Lawrence Hill says the man's name was Claremont.
Okay, so we have a possible name, but can we trust these accounts? I mean, they came out so long after it all happened.
That's the thing. We got to be careful with those later accounts. They're based on memories, on stories passed down, and who knows how much of it is accurate.
Yeah, it really is like a giant game of telephone. By the time those stories made it to the newspaper, who knows how much they'd changed.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to think critically about those sources, to look at who wrote them and why. Were they trying to cash in on the legend? Were they genuinely trying to get to the truth? Or were they just telling a good story?
It's fascinating how all these different narratives can exist at the same time, each one claiming to be the real story, adding another layer to this already complex legend.
And it's that complexity, that sense of not knowing for sure, that keeps us hooked. We love stories that challenge us, that don't give us all the answers, that make us question what we think is true.
And the female stranger's story definitely does all of that. I mean, it spawned so many theories, each one more intriguing than the last.
Oh, I know. You got secret royalty, scandalous affairs, even whispers of espionage. And get this, there's even a theory about Blackbeard, the pirate.
Hold on. Blackbeard, that's a new one.
I know, right? It's a pretty wild theory, and there's really no evidence to support it, but some people believe the female stranger was somehow connected to Blackbeard, like maybe she was a descendant or even a former lover.
That's a stretch, but I gotta admit, it's a pretty romantic idea. A pirate's secret love, hidden away from the world.
Right. Adds a whole other level of adventure to the story. And it shows our fascination with pirates, with their lives of danger and freedom and, doing whatever they want.
I guess when a mystery this big, any theory is on the table. But we have to remember that these are just theories. Fun to think about, but not necessarily true.
That's the key. We can get caught up in the excitement, but it's important to separate the facts from the fiction. The real truth about the female stranger is probably much more complicated than any of these theories can fully capture.
And it brings us back to that central question, what is the truth? Can we even find it after all this time, after all the stories that have been built around this one event?
That's the challenge and the beauty of these historical mysteries. They force us to recognize that we don't know everything, that some questions just don't have clear-cut answers.
And maybe that's okay. Maybe not knowing is what keeps the story so powerful.
It's what lets us imagine, speculate, and connect with the past in a way that feels personal.
The article mentions that some people have tried to follow the trail, to use whatever clues we do have to put the pieces together.
Yeah, like detectives. But what happens?
It seems like those attempts always lead to dead ends.
It's like you said before, trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep changing. You think you've got it figured out, and then something new pops up that throws everything off.
Right, like that whole thing with the Gadsby's Tavern registry.
Oh yeah, that was a good one. The researcher goes looking for their names, thinking they'll find a record of their stay, and what do they find?
The entry for those dates is completely gone.
Imagine that, right? You're so close to a breakthrough and then blank. It's like the universe is playing a game with us.
Totally. A game where the rules keep changing. It makes you wonder, what else is out there? What other clues might have been overlooked or maybe even hidden on purpose?
And why would someone do that? Were they protecting the couple's privacy? Or was there something more deliberate going on? Like they wanted to make sure their story stayed a mystery?
It's impossible to know for sure, but it definitely adds another layer of intrigue to the whole thing. It's like, even in death, the female stranger is still in control somehow. She's shaping how her story is told or not told.
That's a really cool way to think about it. Even after all these years, she's still making us think, still challenging us to deal with the unknowns.
And the article ends by asking the reader some really interesting questions. Like, What do you think happened to the female stranger? And why does her story still matter after all these years?
Those are the questions that really get us thinking, right? The ones that spark our imaginations and make us want to learn more.
We all love a good mystery, but maybe the point isn't to find the answer. Maybe it's about the journey itself, the searching, the exploring, trying to put together a story that might never be complete.
Exactly. It's the exploration that matters, the willingness to dive into the unknown. That's what helps us understand history, ourselves, and the power of these stories that connect us across time.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with those questions. Think about them. Let your imagination run wild. What does the story of the female stranger tell us about how we relate to the past, to mystery, to the things we just don't know?
Maybe it'll inspire you to take a trip to Alexandria, walk those streets, see the female stranger's grave for yourself, and just feel that sense of history all around you.
Or maybe you'll be inspired to do some research, dig through those archives, and see if you can find a clue that everyone else has missed. Maybe you'll be the one to find that missing piece of the puzzle.
Whatever you decide, remember this, the female stranger's story is more than just a ghost story. It's a reflection of who we are as humans.
It reminds us that history isn't always straightforward. Sometimes it's messy, full of gaps and contradictions. It's a puzzle with missing pieces that we may never find.
But maybe that's okay. Maybe the missing pieces are what make it so interesting. They give us space to be creative, to come up with our own interpretation, and to connect with the past in a way that feels real and meaningful.
So think about the female stranger. Let her story remind you that mystery is everywhere, just waiting to be discovered. Keep asking questions, keep searching for answers, and never stop imagining.
And hey, if you ever find yourself in Alexandria on a foggy night walking by Gadsby's Tavern, listen closely. You might just hear a whisper of her story, a story that's been echoing through the centuries, reminding us that some mysteries are meant to stay with us, to make us think, and to keep us searching for the truth, even if we never quite find it.
Until next time, happy exploring. It's like we're chasing a ghost, you know? Every time we think we're getting close to the truth about the female stranger, it just disappears.
It's true, history isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it's more like wandering around in a fog. We have to get comfortable with that uncertainty, embrace the fact that we might not have all the answers.
The article mentions that people have tried to follow the clues, tried to use whatever we know to figure out her story, but it seems like they always hit a dead end.
Yeah, like you said, it's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep changing. Just when you think you found the right fit, something new comes up and throws everything off. Like, remember that attempt to find their names in the Gadsby's Tavern registry?
Oh yeah, that one. They thought they could track them down through the records, find proof that they were actually there.
Exactly. Imagine the excitement of finding that entry, right? Thinking you finally got the proof, and then
It's like,
completely wiped clean. Like someone went to a lot of trouble to make sure their names weren't there.
it's almost like the universe is toying with us, giving us these little glimpses of the truth, but never the full picture. Makes you wonder, right? What else is out there? What other clues are we missing? Or maybe they were deliberately hidden, erased from history on purpose?
Right. And why would someone do that? Were they just trying to protect the couple's privacy? Or was there something more going on? Like, did they want to make sure their story stayed a secret?
It's hard to say, isn't it? But it just makes the whole thing even more intriguing. Even though she's gone, it's like the female stranger is still somehow in control of her own story. She's deciding how it gets told or doesn't get told.
It's a powerful thought, isn't it? Even after all this time, she's still making us think, still challenging us to deal with the things we don't know and may never know.
Yeah, and I love how the article ends by asking the reader these really thought-provoking questions. Things like, what do you think happened to her? And why are we still so fascinated by this story after all these years?
Those are the kinds of questions that keep us coming back, aren't they? The ones that get our minds working and make us want to dig deeper.
I think we're all drawn to mysteries, to puzzles that need solving, but maybe the real fun isn't in finding the answer, but in the journey itself. All that searching, exploring, trying to piece together a story that might never be fully complete.
Exactly. It's the exploration that's rewarding, being willing to embrace the unknown. That's what ends us understand history, ourselves, and the power of these stories that connect us across time.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with those questions. What does the story of the female stranger tell you about how we view the past? About our relationship with mystery and the unknown?
Maybe you'll want to visit Alexandria yourself, walk those same streets, see the female stranger's grave. Imagine what it was like back then.
Maybe you'll get inspired to do some research. Dig through those archives and see if you can find a clue that everyone else has missed. Maybe you'll be the one to uncover that missing piece of the puzzle that brings us closer to the truth.
Whatever you decide, remember that the female stranger's story is more than just a local legend. It's a story about all of us.
It's a reminder that history isn't always a neat and tidy story. Sometimes it's messy, full of contradictions, and missing information. like a puzzle with pieces that we might never find.
But you know what? Maybe that's what makes it so beautiful. Those missing pieces give us space to be creative, to come up with our own interpretations, and to connect with the past in a way that feels really personal.
So keep thinking about the female stranger. Let her story be a reminder that mystery is all around us, just waiting to be explored. Never stop asking questions, never stop searching for answers, and most importantly, never lose that sense of wonder.
And hey, if you're ever in Alexandria walking past Gadsby's Tavern on a dark, foggy night, listen closely. You might just hear her story whispering on the wind. A story that's been echoing through the centuries, reminding us that some mysteries are meant to stay with us, to make us think, to keep us searching for the truth, even if we never quite find it.
Until next time, happy exploring.